Welcome to the groundbreaking news program that delves into the heart of Mormonism, your weekly window into the unique intersection of news, history, and culture that resonates with the tapestry of Mormonism. So whether you're tuning in from the heart of Utah or joining us from around the world, your favorite news program starts now, where news meets insight and the stories of our faith unfold.
Welcome, everybody, to the Mormon Newscast. This is the Mormon Newscast number 21. It is the 13th of May, 2024. And I am joined by Radio Free Mormon and Rebecca Biblioteca. How are you guys tonight?
Really great. Fabulous. I have to say that intro, I now kind of repeat that in my sleep. The tapestry of Mormonism, where the story, it is. It's very soothing. I like it.
Yeah, that is your voice, isn't it, Rebecca?
It is not my voice whatsoever. It's AI.
It is.
Okay, 'cause I listen to my voice to go to sleep at night.
I'm not surprised.
Neither am I.
And so do
Not
half
at all.
my audience. They tell me about it. There was that one person who said, quit putting that music on so loud at the end because I've just drifted off and all of a sudden the music comes on. I go, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Wakes them up.
You're going to be responsible for at least a few heart attacks that take the lives of listeners.
Yes, and bumped heads on low ceilings.
Yes. Well, I'm grateful that both of you are with me tonight. John DeLynn will likely join us late. He's got, I believe, a story here at some point as well. Folks, let me put up on the screen here the thumbnail, and then just to share really quick.
The thumbnail. Can you put the thumbnail back on there for a second, Bill? Is that Kwaku on there in the bottom right?
That's Kwaku down there in the bottom right.
I just want to know, when is he going to give his grandmother her pearl necklace back?
Yeah.
She's going to miss it pretty soon, and then the cops are going to get called, and things are going to go south. I tell you,
he's wearing pearl necklaces in a lot of pictures. So
everyone does it now, and as long as you have pearls to clutch and reasons to clutch them, you've got to wear it.
That's right.
Maybe it's his birthstone. I don't know.
Yeah, it could
there we
be.
go. So on tonight's show, folks, we're going to cover the New York Times recent article on changes that the church made to Mormon missionary attire. The changes were made some time ago, I think in 2018. But the New York Times covered it. We'll share that story. There's the
New York Times on top of things as usual.
Yeah. They're only like 7 years behind here. So
you remember it took them like 2 weeks to catch up on the fact that the church had put up that essay. This is a number of years ago about Joseph Smith practicing polygamy.
Mm-hmm.
There was dead air after it went up, and everybody's wondering when is the press going to pick up on this? And finally, they did.
Yeah, and I think the article was Mormon Church admits Joseph Smith had multiple wives for first time.
Yeah.
And so we'll cover the McKinney Texas P&Z board decision on the LDS Temple.
P&Z.
What's
planning
P&Z
and zoning?
stand for?
Planning and zoning.
Look at that. And then we've got lesbian church discipline and a little bit of info on Mormon Mother's Day. So we'll get right to it, folks. I'll put up here on the screen as soon as I get to this one. Here is the first story. Good evening, folks. Tonight, we're diving into the recent New York Times missionary changes over the past few years. First up, forget the days of knocking on doors with a classic suit and tie. The church is going digital, folks. Missionaries are trading pavement pounding for social media surfing, and the church claims it's working. With more and more young folks glued to their screens, reaching out online just makes sense. And let's talk attire. Sister missionaries in some missions get to say goodbye to skirts and hello to pants. And male missionaries in some missions can now wear a colored shirt, once a subtle cue in ward attire that indicated you were a rebel or that you touched your little factory producing way too much life-giving substance. And in some missions, no tie is required at all. But this is at a time when some adult church members claiming to be faithful and worthy are, for the first time ever, avoiding wearing the garment of the holy priesthood, sport the coolest 70s porn stash, and wear a pearl necklace. Isn't that pretty? Now get off my lawn. But why the switch? Well, according to church leaders, it's all about keeping things normal and natural. In other words, they're trying to meet people where they're at. But the underlying message is that the clean-cut suit and tie and dresses attire of the past was beginning to clash with social expectations too strongly, and that too much rigidity was rubbing this generation of Mormon young adults the wrong way, diminishing interest in a mission. And Mormonism, if nothing else, is always willing to adapt, even at the expense of changing doctrines and theology once thought to be true and unchangeable. Now, this shift didn't happen overnight. It's been a gradual evolution, sparked in part by the pandemic. With in-person gatherings off the table, the church had to get creative. And boy, did they ever. Missionaries are now armed with smartphones, weekly family calls, and more flexibility than ever before. But don't worry, some things haven't changed. You still don't get to pick where you're sent, and those mission announcement parties are still a thing. But hey, at least now you can wear pants and a blue shirt to the shindig. Overall, these changes seem to be paying off. Missionary numbers are on the rise, and more young people are answering the call to serve. Well, that's if you don't believe the Widow's Mite report, where they claim this is just a blip created by COVID that actually will have the numbers returning to a downward decrease in just a year or thereabouts. But I agree, it absolutely is a sign of the church moving with the times. Some see the shift in dress code as a sign that the church was listening to its younger members. And for that, I say kudos to the LDS Church. Now, if you can just start listening to the women generally. The New York Times article seems all too eager to shine a positive light on the LDS Church and its missionaries, and the church was thrilled to tell its members about the coverage. But only time will tell what kinds of differences this leads to for future generations of membership and how it will affect the numbers and tithing revenue. So there you have it, folks. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is embracing the digital age, one pant leg at a time.
All right.
Well done.
Let's bring John.
it.
John, how you doing?
Hi, all. So
Hello.
fun. Hey
Well,
guys.
better late than never.
So go ahead.
No, I'll take it.
So wrapping up the story, the main thing that we were talking about behind the scenes that I want to kind of sort of open up to a discussion with the three of you is, first off, these changes came back in 2018. The audience is not learning something new for those who have been paying attention to Mormonism. But what seems to be going on here, and you mentioned it this morning, John, when you said Mormon, what kind of payola is this? Is the idea that it seems as though the New York Times is doing a favorable piece intentionally that's meant to give the church some good coverage. And usually when these things happen, they're not, they don't just happen by accident. So any thoughts from you guys?
Well, usually when you do 19 negative stories about the church, you want to throw in one every now and again that's positive just to make it look like you're not biased.
Right.
Sort of a palate cleanser, right? Is that what we're saying? It reminded me of, sometimes you'll read a really long story, you'll get to the end and it is sponsored by, it's kind of like Ovaltine, crummy commercial. And you can tell it was just sort of a paid advertisement disguising itself as a story. I kind of got that vibe here, although it never officially said it. It definitely, it was fair and balanced as far as everything positive about the church.
Yeah. John, your thoughts?
Did y'all already mention that I think one of our snoopers determined that a Mormon wrote the article? Was that already mentioned?
No.
Please.
Yeah, so I think I saw, and I haven't confirmed this myself, but we have a lot of super sleuthers that follow what we do. And maybe it was on Reddit where I read that one of our ex-Mormon Reddit members actually looked up the bio on the author of the article, and he's Mormon. And that's fine. It's very possible that this is just a story that the New York Times chose to run. I am curious whether this was payola. By the way, I'm a proud subscriber, a paid subscriber of the New York Times. Margie and I get the New York Times every Sunday. We love the New York Times. And this felt off to me. This felt like a puff piece, and it felt like an example of a paid story where maybe the church ponied up a bunch of money and the New York Times was willing to do a puff piece. I know that, like with local media, like Channel 4 or Channel 5, when they do those Good Morning Utah profiles where they bring on people as experts to talk about a product, oftentimes those people pay to be on the show. And I don't know if the New York Times does that, but I wonder in this case.
That's what I've been doing wrong.
I will say it is strange. I mean, I guess the funny thing here is they have to go back to a change made in 2018 in order to find something positive. We're years and years now into the future. And again, as they pointed out, 5 years. And as they pointed out, what's that? 6.
Yeah.
And as they pointed out, so yeah, I mean, more than a half a decade, and they're pulling the story. But as we found out, even saying like, oh, missionary numbers are up. Well, they are, but not exactly. And it looks like, according to the Widow's Mite, that they're actually in a downward turn and simply had a little blip from COVID. And often I find the church taking data points and sort of manipulating them into being able to tell a positive story about something that really isn't positive. Anything else from you guys? Otherwise, we can move on to the next story.
Yeah, I have
John.
one more thought about that.
yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, RFM.
Oh no, after you. After
Oh,
you.
no, after you. No, I just feel, I've been around missionaries recently. I have friends and family and that kind of thing. And it does seem like there's this push for them to blend in a little more, look a little more Christian, if you can say that, you know what I mean? And not so, the uniform. But I will say, and they also use more Christian verbiage, I found, which helps them communicate with people, instead of saying, come meet the bishop, it might be come meet the pastor, things like that. But I will say that men, I think, are able to wear that relaxed attire. Women still, their code kind of sets them apart. They still look not quite like what, regular people who are not missionaries are wearing. So I think it's very male-based as far as being able to relax and wear a short sleeve shirt and no tie. A sister missionary, having been around sister missionaries getting ready to go, they can wear slacks, but they still have to wear like a long skirt. And they're kind of told this is sort of for your protection. And I do understand that. You want to look you don't want to stand out in any way. However, what's interesting about that, speaking of the digital age, is then you have these sisters, you see them online on Facebook holding a plate of cookies saying, we'll come to your house. So there is that. That's disturbing to me as a mom, that idea. But I've seen a lot of those. I don't know if you guys have.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's just because we're aware of it, because I suppose looking back on the whole history of young women being missionaries, we didn't have any problem with them walking around and knocking on complete strangers' doors all day.
Yeah.
Right.
Which could lead to bad things.
It could.
And once in a while doesn't it?
Yeah. And John, what I wanted to ask you, since you are a person who with me went on a mission, do you have any feelings about this idea that missionaries can now call home once a week? I mean, is this really a mission anymore?
It's one of those things that unless you lived it, you can't understand what it's like to go to a developing country, miss home, and you can only call home on Mother's Day and Christmas when you're sometimes experiencing very extreme and sometimes even dangerous circumstances. And the fact that was the rule for 100 plus years, and then all of a sudden they change it, especially after getting a lot of public pressure and being called out as missions being too cult-like. It's going to be like violin tears, like the world's smallest violin, like wah, wah, who cares? But for those of us who lived it, it's inexplicably infuriating that we had to live through what we lived through to then see now that you can just call whoever. And it's not just calling home. You can literally call friends on your P day. And it's kind of maddening. Really, really quickly, Bill, can I share my screen? Only because I want to make sure and be accurate here. I was able to find who wrote the article. Her name is Lauren Christine Jackson. She's actually following the Mormon Stories Instagram channel. I've got a picture of her up here if it allows me to share the screen.
Yeah, you'll have to share it. I don't see it below. Oh, there it is. There we go.
Only she's wearing a pearl necklace.
This is Lauren Christine Jackson's Instagram page, but more importantly, here's her LinkedIn. And sure enough, it says associate editor at the New York Times, University of Oxford. She didn't even attend BYU, as far as I can tell. It looks like she attended University of Virginia and Oxford. And I don't have any indication that she's Mormon, other than that she's following Mormon Stories Podcast on her Instagram channel. But she looks like a legit reporter for the New York Times, and I can't confirm that she ever has a Mormon connection. And the truth is, it doesn't necessarily matter. She may be a top-notch journalist that just wanted to cover a story near and dear to her heart, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, Lauren, I respect you. Shout out to you. And if you're able to provide any color, we'd love to hear it. I didn't mean to call it a puff piece. I actually haven't read the article, if I'm just being fully honest. Just what I saw of it didn't seem like a New York Times article to me.
Can you not tell by her skin tone whether she's Mormon or not?
No.
I mean, I understand they have a certain look about the face.
Yeah. Does she have the Mormon look? It's like
I
60% accuracy.
She is showing her shoulders in her Instagram profile, and that
Yeah, but
No.
Kwaku's wearing a pearl necklace and a mustache and no garments, and he now represents the josephsmith.com URL. So,
well, if she's Mormon, she's not showing it on her Instagram
yeah.
profile.
Yeah, it appears that if so, certainly not costly signaling all the Mormon status quo with how we appear, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, and if I can speak directly to Lauren, and just in case John DeLynn has offended you enough, you're always welcome to come on Mormonism Live.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. All right, RFM, I'm going to put yours up on the screen. You'll have control, and you can take us into your story.
Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Yesterday, Russell M. Nelson, president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, issued a statement about Mother's Day. And this is the entirety of it. It went up yesterday on Mother's Day, 6:30 in the morning, because he's up early. On this Mother's Day, I have reflected about how our Heavenly Father's plan of salvation was entirely dependent upon the heroic actions of two valiant women, Eve, the mother of all living, and Mary, the mother of our Lord Jesus Christ. These heroic actions continue today as women from all walks of life and in every circumstance imaginable give the precious gift of a mortal body to God's beloved sons and daughters. How grateful I am for my own mother, pictured above, who impacted my life for good in more ways than I could ever describe. So instead of trying to describe any of those, I'm going to launch right into all the great things the church is doing for mothers. Because motherhood plays such a vital part in the success of our societies and in the fulfillment of God's plan for his children, the LDS Church continuously collaborates with dedicated leaders and charitable organizations to improve conditions for mothers and children around the world. This is like the part in Seinfeld where it says, enough about me. Tell me what you think of me. Because really, this is all we're going to hear about mothers right now, is how great the church is. Earlier this year, the church participated with a nursing and midwifery development center to open a 36,000 square foot training facility to train nurses and midwives in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. This facility will help women and children survive and thrive. In Memphis, Tennessee, USA, the church has collaborated with the NAACP to create the My Baby for Me initiative, designed to help equip mothers with the knowledge they need to care for their young children and reduce infant mortality rates. So it sounds like very worthwhile causes that the church is involved in, collaborating with to some degree or other. It's not exactly specified how much they're collaborating in this, but they're participating. So those are the two things. I'm going to want to get your thoughts on anything you want to comment on in the story. But there's another thing that I thought was especially noteworthy, and that's one sentence that I haven't gotten to yet. He continues, in both of these instances, the church participated with extraordinary women to implement these tremendous efforts. So you see, it is kind of about women. The day in, day out influence women from every circumstance have as they lift, mentor, encourage, console, teach, and love others is remarkable. And here's the line that I want to get your thoughts on. In other words, women mother us all. And then he concludes, on this Mother's Day, I salute all women who give tirelessly of themselves to make life better for all of us. And by the way, I had highlighted it here. This is that part that's just blown up a little bit larger and then highlighted at the bottom. In other words, women mother us all. And there's something about that struck me the wrong way, and I'm not sure I've found all the words for it yet. What do you think about this, Rebecca?
We talked about this earlier a little bit. I mean, they're trying to universalize it, of course. For a lot of people, Mother's Day is a very painful day, especially in the church. If you don't have children and you wish you had children, it can be, I've had relatives in that scenario. It's a very painful day. People even stay home. For other women who are mothers, that whole statement was very pedestalic, if I can say that. It's like a mother and a woman isn't a real person. They're just somebody on a pedestal that's doing this sort of overarching sort of activities and taking care of people. And then, of course, as you said, they launch into here's what we're doing to support women. So I don't know. Those are kind of my thoughts. We also talked about how the word mother being used as a verb is very interesting. You had some thoughts on that, RFM.
I did. Thank you for noticing that. Yeah. And first off, this whole idea about mother, I think one of the things that kind of bothers me about it is he's been talking about women in every respect, right? In every walk of life and every circumstance imaginable, which means women who have children, women who don't have children, women who have gone on from having children, or like Camille Johnson, while they had children, were going on with their legal career, their 30-year legal career, right? And yet, no matter what it is that women do, it sounds like President Nelson sees them all as falling within this category of mother. And no matter what it is they're doing, they're mothering all of us. What do you think about this, Bill?
Every month, or every year that I was a bishop, we had Mother's Day. And again, I saw it in all the bishops before me, but there's this thing where you hand out some candy or you hand out some flowers, and you gave it to all the adult women of the ward because you didn't want to leave someone out who feels sad that they haven't had a kid. But by doing that, you're really actually probably making them feel worse.
Yep.
If you're going to say, like, what is mothering? Mothering is the feminine energy of all of us that nurtures and has empathy and does what that female or feminine energy does. In this same way, you could say, well, all of us, men and women, mother all of us at various times. I just think it's a way to give out like a platitude and make people feel good, but it really doesn't say anything at all.
What do you think, John? And by the way, so I don't forget it, what Rebecca had brought up was this idea about mother as a verb. And we all kind of understand what he's saying, and even if we don't necessarily agree with the way he's saying it, that mothering is something that is caring and kind and patient. Ideally, I guess, I'm not sure everybody had the exact same mother who fits that category. I did mostly, except when I, drove her to desperation. However, what about father as a verb? What does father mean as a verb, John?
Well, what should I answer? Like, what I'm mindful of is the proclamation on the family, which basically declares that the men's primary roles are to protect and to preside and provide. So they're the protectors, they're the strong ones. They go out and make the money, and then they preside, which means at the end of the day they get to make the final say. And then the women's job is to nurture. And obviously we've talked a lot about the fact that are men not supposed to nurture their children, and are women not allowed to provide, and why are men presiding? How does that ever make sense? Shouldn't there be an egalitarian structure where both? The other thing I was just going to say, and that's all problematic. The gender binary is problematic for many people, but certainly trying to say what a man's role is versus a woman in terms of nurturing or providing or presiding or loving, it's just problematic. It all falls apart if you really just kind of scratch beneath the surface. The only other thing I'll say is that I don't know if President Nelson intended this or not, but more often than not, when mothering is used as a verb, in my experience, it's usually used in a pejorative sense. It's like, stop mothering me. It's not meant like, oh, stop loving me endlessly. It's like, stop nagging me, stop trying to control me. So I don't know if it necessarily brings always the connotation that the prophet intended.
Okay, so let me ask this. Thank you, by the way, John. Let me ask you, Rebecca.
Sure.
When you say that a man fathers a child
Yeah.
versus a woman mothers a child, it strikes me that they are completely different understandings of those things. What do you think, Rebecca?
Yeah,
What does
well, I
it
mean,
mean
the
when
only
you say a man fathers a child?
yeah, the only definition using it like a verb is to create, right? To impregnate, right? There's no other connotation for that. To mother someone has a lot of different things it could mean. It could mean smother. I've been accused of that, like John said, or, all kinds of things, caring, nurturing. But yeah, there's no verb for father that means anything that has to do with nurture, care for, not at all. It's just creation. And there it is. Which brings me to my point of what's missing in all of that, of course, mother in heaven, right? Huge issue right now, but not at all going to be brought up at all. Of course, in President Nelson's address, or I didn't see anything else about that on regular church channels, of course, because you're not going to.
Well, President Nelson is old enough that his mother could be mother in heaven.
A mother in heaven. That's right. Although I'm guessing every single word saying, "Oh, my Father." I've never been to a Mother's Day sacrament meeting where that song was not sung.
That's true. Well, it's like John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. President Nelson's mother is our mother too. Anyway, okay, so let's go to the next thing. Now, Bill, did you notice that I saw you? Yeah, here's the next thing. Thank you. I'll go to the next one. Now, here's something that's very interesting because, of course, it's on the newsroom. It's on the church website. I went and I started looking at some of the comments that had been made, and I noticed something that was very interesting, is that for the first time I've ever noticed, and I haven't really paid that much attention before, so forgive me if I've missed it, but apparently President Nelson is interacting with people, members of the church, who are making comments about his Mother's Day sentiment. And I collected a few of those because it was very interesting because they all say the same thing and it sounds a little bit strange. What he says is here, look on the left. You see Russell Nelson at the top? These are the pictures. There's some photographs at the bottom, not above, but as it turned out at the bottom of his message. And here you've got John Scott saying, President Nelson, thank you for these beautiful words. And then Russell M. Nelson, same name, same picture, comes in to John Scott and says, you're blessed. And then we do the hands, the thank you hands. But and I thought, that's weird. And then I noticed that wasn't the only time. So over here in the middle at the top, that's the same one to John Scott. But right below it, Marie Barton, she says, thank you, President Nelson, for all, it's the same, the normal effulgent blather about Russell Nelson and how wonderful he is. And Russell M. Nelson comes in and says to Marie Barton, you're blessed. Hands. And over here to Paulina J. Gibson Seals. Wow, that's a long name. Paulina J. Gibson Seals. Well, he says to all of them, you're blessed. Hands. What is going on here? Can someone help me unravel this mystery?
It's not very Mormon, is it?
No, and I don't believe that President Nelson knows about emojis. I find that really hard to believe.
What's going? I mean, somebody obviously. Okay, look, I don't think that President Nelson actually posted the original thing. Maybe he wrote it down. Maybe he gave it to somebody else to write or dictated it. I don't know. But you've got all these people responding, saying it's wonderful, wonderful. And now you've got ostensibly, though I find it hard to believe, Russell M. Nelson engaging with people with the same comment over and over, saying you're blessed, which is not something that we typically hear LDS church leaders saying.
Well, and it's not used correctly. Look how strange. They rave about him, and then he says, you're blessed, meaning blessed because of your interaction with me, the prophet. I don't quite understand the context.
You're blessed because you think I'm great.
That's what I mean. Is that really what's happening? My other thought is, because of course I cover AI in the church a lot, and there are new guidelines on AI, and they definitely say that you will never not understand that you were dealing with a bot or, some kind of a chat function. So this to me seems like something like that. Either someone is running his social media, although if they were, they might be a little more creative and choose some variations, some different emojis, maybe a muscle or something. I don't know. So this seems like perhaps a bot to me, but we've been told absolutely we will know in our church interactions if we are dealing with something that's AI. So it is a little confusing.
Yeah, maybe Aaron Sharanian finally found something he could do.
Yeah, he's back to St. Your Bless.
By the way, I forgot, that's not all of them. And these are just the ones I found. Here's several more, okay? And it's the same thing. On the left, you'll see Russell Nelson saying, you're blessed. In the middle, you're blessed. On the right, you're blessed. Everybody's getting blessed by President Nelson except for me.
Is he trying to pretend he's the Pope or something?
That's what I was thinking.
Just going around and giving blessings?
Yeah.
It's not a very Mormon thing. This is out of the ordinary for anything I've seen in all my time in Mormonism.
Yep. And this is not a very Mormon emoji. You don't see that a lot.
No. So I've got to say, out there in the audience, if anybody has any ideas as to what's going on, go ahead and put that in the comments. Or we don't have a call-in feature at the end of the show, do we?
We need
so you
to
can't call in, but put it in the live chat if you would, if you know anything about this, because something's up. That's all I can say. Something's up. Anyway, after having revealed that, I wanted to go back to President Camille Johnson's address at the BYU Women's Conference.
Can I just say one thing? Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead, John.
I'll just say my 89-year-old mom, who just turned 89 yesterday on Mother's Day.
Oh, yeah.
She does include emojis. So she's not 99, but she's 89, and occasionally she'll throw an emoji in. So who knows? Maybe the God's one true prophet on the earth has learned emojis. I mean, it's possible. Stranger things have happened.
Indeed.
I take it back. If your mom can do it, then it can be done.
I thought you were going to confess it was you who'd hacked into the system, John. President Camille Johnson. Oh, yeah. So here's the thing. This address, this is the one that's got women, the latest thing now that's been said by LDS women's leadership. Thank you so much, Landon. That has gotten a lot of LDS women kind of upset. But this address was delivered Friday, May 3rd, 2024. I did an episode about it just because there was a newspaper article about it that came out talking about women and their responses to this. By the way, the whole thing about this, if you don't know, is that Camille Johnson came up in BYU Women's Conference and as the general president of the Relief Society told all the women in the church that she has followed the prophets ever since she was a young person and done everything she was supposed to do that the prophets told her to do, including having a 30-year career as a corporate lawyer. That's why it's causing problems, okay? So she said that a number of times. We did a women's panel discussion on the Saturday, May 11th, 2024. I think it's the best panel discussion I've ever done, or been part of, I should say, because it was actually the 4 women, Rebecca being one of them, who did a sensational job talking about this. But I'm saying this to tell you this, is that I had 6 clips from Camille Johnson's talk for the women's panel to talk about. And I had meant to have an additional clip, but I somehow didn't include it. And I went back and I found it today. If you've watched that panel discussion, this is the clip where Camille Johnson says something about her financial security. She actually says she doesn't even have financial security even now because she's so, I guess, desirous to relate to the other women, that she says she doesn't have financial security even now. And it was at this point in the talk, and the only point in her 34-minute talk, where there was an audible reaction from the women assembled. And what I had put it like this, I said, why did the women laugh? Now, looking back at this, I'm not sure it's a laugh. It's almost like something is said that's extraordinary, and there's all this murmuring or talking amongst the crowd, right? And I'm going to play that clip now that I found it, and I'm going to ask all 3 of you, starting with Rebecca, what it is your thoughts are about this, and why did this comment about Camille Johnson saying that she still didn't have financial security even after a 30-year career in corporate law cause this reaction among the women? And here it is. And I think I can push play, or no, only Bill can. Here we go.
That in keeping the covenants we have made, we open the line of communication. What could I do with more faith in Jesus Christ and the capacity enhancing strength and power that comes with covenant keeping? I could accept the next call from President Nelson to serve as the Relief Society General President. Sisters, what if I had stuck with my comfortable narrative? I would have enjoyed spending more time with my grandchildren, and I could have been assured the financial security I don't presently enjoy. And I would have missed a soul-searching, stretching, and faith-building experience. Uphill? Yes. Worth it? Oh, yes.
Okay, so you heard that. Did
Yeah.
everybody hear that? Was that loud enough
Yep.
for everybody to hear?
Yep.
What did you hear, Rebecca, and why do you think?
I heard somebody going, "You have got to be kidding me." I mean, that's sort of how I interpreted that tone, because that she obviously has financial security. There's no way her husband owns a successful car dealership in Salt Lake. I'm guessing there's some semblance of financial security. And you say things like that, I believe, in a group setting to try to make yourself seem relatable, but it doesn't work at all. It's like somebody who weighs 100 pounds giving a talk at a Weight Watchers meeting and go, "Oh, I really could lose a few." It makes people angry. You're not relatable at all. You're insulting the people in the audience. And I think that's the hushed tone that we heard there. And I don't know who she thought she was trying to fool. It doesn't make her relatable to any of us because we know she's not telling the truth.
Wow. John?
Yeah, I'm a bit at a loss. I wish our leaders could just be honest with us. I wish they could speak from the heart. I wish they could speak in ways that just feel sincere and vulnerable versus canned and scripted and polished. That sounds like something a scriptwriter or a PR person would say, but I'm not feeling emotionally connected to her. I'm not feeling like she's really getting real with us. It feels, unfortunately, kind of corporate and polished.
Bill, was this something that reminded you, as it did me, of, I think it was Bonnie Cordon with Jeffrey Holland in that broadcast from
Yes, the
Africa
same
or something?
thing.
Do you remember
Yeah.
what she said? Bonnie Cordon said?
It was Elder Holland making a point that Bonnie and her husband didn't start off with very much money at the beginning of their marriage. They were pretty poor. Meanwhile, they are two of the wealthiest people in the church, for that matter. When I heard this, it made me think of the episode we did where we talked about indiscernible from a fraud, because what the church does generally on tons of issues is it goes quiet for a season and then suddenly comes out and lets you know that something drastically has changed from where it was 20 years ago. And you go back 20 years in the status of women and what they're expected to, and all of a sudden something's shifted, and it probably shifted a decade ago. But now the church finally feels safe to sort of have people stand out front and start saying the things that have changed. Sort of like 1978, and McConkie comes out and gives this sort of like, forget everything we've ever said, not an apology, but forget everything we've ever said. And then in 2013, the race essay comes out and says, these are racist theories, not doctrines. We've disavowed them. And the entire church had to go, whoa, when did that happen? And I think you're seeing that right now, sort of on the story we covered with Charlie Bird a couple months ago. You're seeing that with this story here. Things are changing in the church. They probably changed some time ago. And the church, some of its members and leaders are just now beginning to sort of get the message out front of the public. And I can't help but think that most Latter-day Saints deep down are experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance, sort of like maybe that crowd did as they made that collective noise.
Yeah, I think that what's going on is probably pretty obvious, which is that they know that what they are encouraging women to do is very likely to put them in a place of economic insecurity. Get married young, start having kids as soon as possible. Don't get your career lined up. Don't make sure that you have enough money coming in to have kids, because that's Satan's plan. God wants you to have kids when you can't afford them. So that's necessarily going to put a lot of people in economic distress. And so in order to relate or feel like I'm being relatable to them, even though I'm the president of the Relief Society, which really is neither here nor there, but I'm in a position where, no, I don't have to worry about finances because I had a 30-year career in law and my husband has a successful car dealership, and that's wonderful. But almost the need to say, oh, well, like Bonnie Cordon said, oh, we still don't have enough money. And Camille Johnson just said, I'm still not financially secure. And I feel like they feel they need to say that to be relatable. But on the other hand, most women can see that a mile off as a $3 bill.
I think there were a lot of things said under their breath at this conference. If I could read just really quickly this text I got, and I got a lot of text, I think because of my participation in your panel, RFM, from a lot of women saying, oh, I heard this, or I felt this way about it. And so it's been really interesting since I did the panel and it aired to kind of field and go through these texts. But this one I thought was really interesting. It said, I just got off the phone with my mom. I have the scoop on the BYU Women's Conference. This is where Camille spoke. My mom and my sisters volunteered at it. The church charged $150 per ticket. They charged the same if you only viewed the conference via Zoom. They didn't include lunch. My mom said the women were visibly upset about Camille Johnson's talk. Also, at the food selling options like Costa Vida, food was expensive, $5 for a soda. People were not happy about the cost. She overheard a lot of $250 billion in the stock market and making money off all of this. Isn't that interesting? I thought that was fascinating.
That's
People
very
are not happy.
fascinating. It brings it home to you about Moroni Day too, remember?
Exactly. Yeah. I should have
Brief
tried to go
recap
to
for
this.
the audience.
I might have been removed.
Yeah, well, regardless of whether you were on again, off again, as far as whether you could go, you still had to pay $250, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was
To
and
go-
this is 150, even if you're in your living room, in your pajamas, zooming in to hear Sister Johnson give her address about how she doesn't have any money. Now you don't have any money either because you just paid $150.
So we all have something in common.
It's a level playing field. That's the bottom line.
Giving church broke an entirely new meaning. I'm sorry, Bill.
No, I just wanted to add, like, if she says that she has doubt about her own financial safety and security, what that probably means is that every family in the church just about has that financial. In other words, you've claimed something that almost certainly you probably don't have a right to claim in comparison to all the real people who are struggling to meet their day-to-day responsibilities. It's sort of just tone deaf. Again, one more time where the church seems to be tone deaf.
It reminds me of a saying by Marcus Aurelius, I think it was, when he said, "Don't let people hear you complain when you live in a palace."
Yeah.
All right. So what's the next story, Bill?
All right. Let's see here. So we've got the McKinney, Texas story. So Rebecca, take us there.
Have the McKinney, Texas story. Here we go again. Let's see. Do I have control of my slides? I don't think I do. Do I?
You have absolute power.
I don't think I do. I don't see my little buttons. I didn't do that.
Okay, I'm doing that. I'll do it
Dang
for you,
it.
but you should have access.
Wow, that's too bad because I have a whole bunch of slides. Dang it. I really don't. Darn it.
Just not to interrupt the show, but in the future, I think it may be a matter of being logged in to the Mormonish account using StreamYard.
I'm logged in. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to say next slide. I'm so sorry. That'll be really annoying. Okay. We are going to talk about the McKinney, Texas temple. There are several temples that on Mormonish we follow, all in different stages of the church trying to build something there that does not fit in with the planning or the zoning or any of the regulations of a city. So if we can go to our next slide. Just very generally, this was announced in 2nd of October, 2022. It's 43,000 square feet and 213 feet high. Very hard to picture how big that is, but we'll get into that as we go on. Let's go to our next slide. So the first thing that the residents heard, and I have gone over this before, so this part will be brief, and then we'll get to the good stuff. The first thing that the first awareness the residents had was a letter that arrived in their mailbox, and it said, "Hi, we're building a temple right here in your neighborhood. It's 2 stories, and it meets all of city regulations." So the residents were like, okay, that's interesting. It did say it was 43,000 square feet. Some of the residents I talked to thought, well, that's, what kind of building is that? That's kind of interesting. 2 stories and 43,000 square feet. But nothing really raised alarm until they started to see the plans that were being presented to the Planning and Zoning Board and made available for people to look at. And then they started to realize, oh my gosh, this is something else. What is this? Let's go to our next slide. And of course, McKinney is famous in temple building world here because we got wind of these letters that we were being sent to members, not just in the stake there, but all over, where they were asking them to write in support of the temple. There's that happens everywhere. Write your city council, write your planning and zoning board, and they kind of give them a little script to follow. But what was really interesting here, if we'll go to the next slide, is the focus on the height of the temple. You guys have probably all been hearing about this. Some people are still confused. If they can prove that the height of the temple is an absolute essential part of LDS worship, there's a lot of legal workarounds. RFM covered this very well, a RLUIPA Act. They'll have to let the temple be built in the city if you can prove that it's essential. So this particular letter, I'll just read this one part. The height of the steeple is part of our religious observance. The steeple is the temple's most distinctive architectural feature and serves no other purpose than to send a religious message. Steeples point toward heaven. They serve a purpose of lifting our eyes and thoughts toward heaven. The steeple expresses a message of faith and devotion to God. So you don't need to use these exact words when you write to your city council or your zoning board. In fact, it's probably best if you don't. And so they're basically coaching people to make sure that they include this verbiage anytime they discuss the reason they need a temple. And we'll see this as I start playing some audio from some of the meetings that came up. So let's go to our next slide. So this is really cute. Mosiah, you guys probably all know who she is. You're probably familiar with the family proclamation to the world. She made something called the Steeple proclamation to the world. I just thought this was so cute. If this is our main tenet of our faith, now it starts out, I won't read the whole thing, but she says, we, the esteemed leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ, blah, 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 with a twinkle in our eye, a wiggle out of our ears, and a bloating gas in our hearts, proclaim that the sacred and towering significance of the temple steeple. And it kind of goes on. It's really cute if you want to pause and read it. So again, members are being instructed and told that this steeple is the most important part of their religion. And unbelievably, when you watch some of the footage on the news of the members addressing the Planning and Zoning Board, they are visibly crying about the height of the steeple. It only takes a few weeks to introduce this into the idea that this is what we care about, and they care deeply. Okay, let's go to our next slide. All right, so since our last update, what's happened next is there was a community open house. It was at the church, and the church's lawyer addressed them to talk about some of the concerns, because by this point, the residents and the neighbors are going, what is happening? What is this building? Who are these people? They're trying to understand. So I do have a little bit of audio. It's hard to hear, but there are subtitles. So if we can kind of go to that, Bill, and we'll see if we can make that heard. The first question they're going to answer, and the church attorney is going to answer this, is why the heck does the steeple have to be this tall? And he's going to tell everybody this is why.
For the steeple is to continue to draw your eyes to and encourage people to look up as they face challenges in life and put their trust in God. It's meant to be a symbol of hope for members, and we know it incorporates the areas such as the celestial room that Jay spoke about. It's designed to be the most religious room in the temple because it's meant to symbolize heaven. It's on the second floor to symbolize that God is on a higher level than we are in life. And its arch ceilings, its high arch ceilings, are to represent the beauty and the significance to remind you when you go in the celestial room that you're going to experience similar to heaven, and it is a grand place. Fundamentally, the ability to express your religious beliefs and this church's religious beliefs are embodied in the earth.
So there it is, right there. The steeple is that important. And you could hear the women who were taping it. When you listen closely, one of them goes, he's lying. They never believed that before, right? They're whispering, just like we heard with Camille Johnson. They're saying, this is not right. So he kind of makes up all the, I'd never heard any of those significances of the steeple. God is on the second floor, the archways, all of that. But this is what the attorney is telling everybody in McKinney, Texas at this meeting. And the last part, he reminds them, it is your constitutional First Amendment right that you can have this steeple. Gosh darn it, because it's important to your faith. So any thoughts on that very quickly?
Once again, what was the context of that statement? Was that in a city meeting?
Yeah, it was the meeting that the church put on for residents to tell them what was happening. And so they were making sure that the residents understood you will have a 213-foot building right there in your town because it's our religious right. And that height has always been the most important part of our worship as Mormons.
I'll just tell you folks in McKinney, Texas, as somebody who spent a couple decades in Mormonism, I'd never heard, nor do I think most Mormons have ever heard ever any sort of theology around temple steeples. And just so you know, I agree with the lady who whispers, the church is trying to pull a fast one on you.
Yeah.
And you're being absolutely deceived into thinking this is a common part of LDS theology.
Yep. So it goes on with the attorney then explaining why they must allow it to be built legally. And he brings the Department of Justice into it, which is not exactly accurate. So if we can go to the next slide. These two are the worst audio. The rest I have are better. So this is, you could possibly face a lawsuit from the church, although they say it will come from the Department of Justice. So let's listen to that really quick.
And some folks are saying they have trouble hearing it. Just
read along. That's what I'm saying. Please read along. It was.
So here we go.
The Department of Justice sent out a memo to all the cities, counties, and states in this nation to say, you need to recognize the federal statute. The Department of Justice currently active investigating lawsuits and investigations and bringing lawsuits to enforce the law. So this town, if it's found to violate, will need to comply or face enforcement from the Department of Justice. Under the United States Constitution and the federal state statute, the city can't substantially burden the free exercise of religion.
Yeah. So you probably heard a very visible, a very, you could hear an audible reaction there. So he's basically saying it's the Department of Justice that is going to bring you to your knees if you don't allow the expression of this religious freedom. That is not true. It's the LDS Church that sues people like Cody, 3, I think going on 4, maybe 1 was pulled back lawsuits. But this is Texas. And I'm sorry, in my interactions with these residents, you do not mess with Texas. You could hear them going, what? I mean, they're not having it. He was threatening them, basically. He was
very clearly. He was threatening them.
Yep. As a lawyer, RFM, did you recognize that threatening tone?
I would have started throwing things at that point. I would have stood up and started yelling.
Yeah.
By the way, can we put that picture up? Because I think that what they're inviting, if this actually goes through and they do have the temple with its spire there. Do we have the picture of the temple? It's up there with your recordings, Rebecca.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you see that? It's kind of like Art Deco. You see the top part of that steeple? Do you have that up there?
I was trying. Let's just, how's
there's
that
a couple
one?
other pictures as we go along. Yeah, there we
right
go.
there.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. I would imagine that at least somebody would be tempted to, someone young and agile, not I, to get up there and get some kind of like a stuffed animal, like a black gorilla stuffed animal, and strap it up there to the top of that spire.
I'll never look at it in the same way again. You're absolutely right. So, funny. And it is 213 feet tall. So although technically only a 2-story building, there's a little wiggle room there. All right, let's move on to the next slide after the 2. Okay, so after this, is that the next one after the 2 that I think it is. Yeah, let's double check. We also learned that the residents were involved in a fast. If you go back 1, the stake sent out a letter saying, we're going to fast this Sunday. We're going to fast. The hearts will be softened so that this temple can be allowed. So they had this wonderful fast. These are just updates about McKinney. The residents, of course, knew nothing about this happening, but they had stake-wide, temple district-wide fast for the temple. So let's go.
Hey, Rebecca, will you click on the screen where the slide is? And I think then it will show up.
Yeah, I've been trying to. I'm so sorry. Isn't that
mine
weird?
was blank too. And then I had to click the screen and then it showed up.
Yeah, no, it's not. Okay. So the next thing what happened, and this is where we're really going to dive in here, is the Fairview City Planning and Zoning Board meeting happened on May 9th. Now, this is when it's open to public comment. So you have residents and neighbors that are there in the neighborhood where this temple is going to be built. And then you have members from all over in the temple district coming to talk about the temple. And I kind of prepped the residents that I work with because I've seen this in Heber. I've seen this in Cody. I know how this goes. The residents will come prepared with knowledge of zoning codes, laws, planning, master plan of the city. The LDS people will show up because they've been told to, and they will basically, talk about how important the temple is to them and their faith. And this is a 2.5-hour meeting. And it was so interesting. And we'll hear this in a minute, to listen as the people on the board We're like, okay, that we've heard about the faith. That's enough. Do you have anything to say about the zoning or the regulations or anything legal? So let's go to the next slide. It just gets really interesting from here. Here's a picture of the residents in green wearing a shirt, and then everybody else that was there that were not residents. You can kind of tell the difference for and against the proposal here. And again, this is going to be a recommendation that they're voting on for the city council. So let's go to the next
Do we know
slide.
what those green shirts said?
We do. I've got a slide. There you go. So I taught the residents a very important phrase from an article of faith, and you can probably see it right there. Fairview United, keeping it country, because this is a very rural setting, follow the law of the land and not 1 inch taller. So they're all wearing that. They're simply asking that when an institution comes to approach the planning and zoning board about building a building, that they follow the existing master plan and they follow the existing rules and regulations of the area. That's all they're asking. They're more than happy to have a temple built in their city. They welcome it. They love their LDS neighbors, but please don't try to be disrespectful and put something like this in an area where it 100% doesn't belong. So let's get into some of this audio, and this is better audio than the other one. So, okay. So there is an LDS area rep who is there. He's been at all the meetings, and he is going to, again, explain to everyone there and on the board why the height of the temple, why it must be 213 feet to kind of count as a temple. So if we can play that and turn it up as loud as you can.
Scone, and I am the area authority for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There are temple heights and steeple heights of variety of sizes, but each temple undergoes an incredible intensive process of planning stages. And in this case, it is by the leadership of the church, the upper leadership of the church determined that this would be the size of this steeple. And so that's why it's been designated at its current height. Everything reaches towards heaven. It is all looking towards God. It is all looking towards Jesus Christ. It is all pointing us heavenward. And so that's the symbolic nature of the steeple, although there are a variety of heights of steeples.
So, for example, the Dallas Temple, do you know how high its steeple is?
I do not know how high.
95 feet.
95 feet.
That's one of the residents. They know everything.
This temple comparable to the Dallas Temple?
This temple is
It's 44. Dallas Temple's 44,200.
44. Yes,
Seven
it's the
square
same.
feet.
It's the same, around the same square foot. Yes.
It's 95 foot high on 6 acres. Welcome.
So there is no specific tenet of the faith that dictates the height of the steeple.
It does not dictate the exact height of the steeple.
But it dictates the purpose.
That's a
But it
soundbite
dictates
they'll
the
use.
Purpose. The leadership, the upper leadership of the church dictates the height of the steeple.
Thank you.
One question from here. Do all your temples have steeples?
They don't all have steeples. There are nearly 350 temples, either in planning stages or under construction. Some have domes, but they all have this semblance of pointing heavenward, and they're all quite high. But I couldn't tell you what the size and the average is of the steeples throughout the world
Dennis,
of those temples.
Mesa, Arizona Temple has no spire. It's 53 feet tall, 75,000 square feet.
Okay, I'm going to ask that the commissioner.
Okay. Yeah. So it kind of went on like this. Yeah, it kind of went on like this. And the Planning and Zoning Board is really trying to find out, is this an essential part of your faith? Is it? And you could hear the rep kind of wiggling around, trying to say it points towards heaven. It has a semblance. What do you guys think about that explanation?
Go ahead, Arfa.
Well, he was obviously caught flat-footed. He wasn't expecting any follow-up questions because then he really was in trouble. By the way, is this the same guy who's was the anchor, the news anchor?
Yes, this is what's so surprising to me. This man is a news anchor. And yet I feel in this situation, and we'll hear him later on, he's sort of out of his depth and struggling for words because I believe It might be cognitive dissonance. It's very hard to try to explain something that you've just been told is important a few weeks prior, and you're not exactly sure how to get that across. Any other thoughts?
At that point, he was floundering so much. I expected him to say, "This is Ted Baxter signing off and saying good night and good news." I'm sorry,
Yep.
John. Go ahead.
What was
You
his
got
name?
one, John?
What was his name?
Ted Baxter.
No, the area authority.
The actual, I redacted it. I don't know. I always feel bad about telling anybody, but
it's
he's the
different.
Southwest area rep. Anyone can look it up.
Is it Gifford Nielsen?
No.
Okay. All right.
No, it's not. So, okay. So the Planning and Zoning Board is just trying to understand what's happening. And as I said, LDS member after LDS member is coming forward. They're very, very emotional about the height of the temple and the temple. There's one young man who actually ends his address to the Planning and Zoning Board with "In the name of Jesus Christ, amen." I mean, I've listened to the whole meeting there. And then you have the residents, like you heard there, it's 43,000. It's 95. They know every stat. They know every planning and zoning regulation. They know it all. They prep very well. So let's go to the next slide. These only get better, believe me. Okay. Here's where it gets really interesting. And as I've said, there's been LDS member after LDS member getting up and just talking about how important the height of the temple is. Very emotional. So now we come to this woman.
Before we play it, can I just ask you, RFM, as a lawyer, in that previous soundbite, you have an official for the church saying that it doesn't really matter what the height of the temple steeple is, that the leadership of the church for each specific temple picks the steeple height.
Mhm.
And I have to imagine that the first line of "it doesn't matter what the temple steeple height is" would be admissible in court as evidence that the temple steeple height doesn't matter to the church. And then it doesn't matter also what the leaders say that temple's height would be, I would think, because you still have to stay within the law. You can't just go, I know Texas has a height of 37 feet, but we decided in a closed room that we prayed about it and we're going to have a 300-foot temple steeple, even though temple steeple heights don't matter.
Yeah.
I think that's the key part.
Yep.
Because as far as faithful Latter-day Saints go, as soon as the leadership says it's supposed to have a spire and it's supposed to be this high, then that is the word of the Lord coming down to them. And therefore, it must be defended at all costs. And therefore, because the prophet says, or at least his lackeys say that it has to be this high, therefore, we've got to get behind it and try and push it through, even if we have to make up stories about what it signifies and how important it is to us. And what you heard there was Ted Baxter getting caught flat-footed by questions being asked. Well, don't you have temples that don't have steeples? Well, we have 300 of them, so maybe a few don't. But what about the Mesa, Arizona temple?
Yeah,
doesn't it just have a dome? Yeah, well, it's still kind of pointing toward heaven, just sort of
the
in
semblance,
just sort of this round, this round sort of way that sort of points toward heaven.
Well, and you really did hit on it. Basically, what they're saying is anytime the leadership said, "This is it, this is the place," you can't go back. However, interestingly, this temple was originally announced as the Prosper Temple. Very unfortunate name, of course, given $250 billion. But in the town of Prosper, where it was going to be built, the town used eminent domain and it put a road right through the property. So the temple was moved to Fairview, although it's called the McKinney Temple. And as I understand it, Fairview and McKinney, it's a little dicey perhaps. And so some of the residents were asking, why is this called the McKinney Temple and you're putting it in Fairview? And the area rep even made the claim, I bet we can get it changed. I bet we can change it to Fairview. I mean, he was backpedaling and spitballing the entire time. So we'll have to share this in the link on our new Facebook page, the Newscast. I'll put the link to the audio of the entire meeting there and you guys can dive in and dissect it. There are quite a few sound bites, but this next clip is pretty representative of the tone and you'll hear the reaction as we go along. Here's another LDS woman who is in favor of the temple.
My family moved here in 1986. I had the wonderful blessing of going to Lovejoy. I have been here all night. I recognize the discussion is about the height of the spire. I want to talk about that. As I've listened to both sides discuss this, I feel like the gap is in an understanding of our belief. And I'm not asking anyone here to believe what I would like to help give context to you about, but it may perhaps impart some understanding about why we are here and why we do support the CUP as it has been submitted, including the high spire. We believe that there is a prophet of God who lives on the earth. His name is President Nelson. And we believe that he communicates directly with Jesus Christ. We also believe that there are 12 apostles on the earth currently today. And they work with President Nelson to further their work of Jesus Christ. There are a ton of denominations, and we believe Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father love all people equally, agnostic to whether they're religiously minded or not. In this specific instance, the temple designs and the creation and location and the height and all of that, we believe comes through a specific conduit of hierarchy that leads back to Jesus Christ. So we are not interested, I will speak for myself, I am not interested in bullying the city of Fairview into having the height of spire as it has been submitted. But it is representative of our faith. And when we're asked, well, is this doctrine related or not? If we take a step back and you can understand what we believe is the order of communication from Jesus Christ to our prophet, to the 12 apostles, down to execution to those of us members of the church who do reside in Fairview, we are being asked to choose between being neighborly or following Jesus Christ. And that's where it comes. I'm explaining. It's okay.
All right,
You don't have to agree.
Ask you,
I'm explaining my personal view.
I understand that it's not an issue for for planning and zoning. So
The height
again,
of the spire is.
you either support or you oppose.
The height of the spire is. And so I'm trying to help close the gap.
You've made that statement, as have a number of people previously, and I've asked repeatedly that we not repeat the same thing over and over again. So we understand that in your faith, you believe that the height of the spire is important. We understand that. We've understood that for a number of people who have spoken. So I'm just trying to get through to allow anybody to speak that has something different or other to address the commission with. So
I understand. I believed that my context might help close the gap, but I appreciate your time. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, that helped a lot. I got to tell you, I mean, how many people other than Mormons
Name, address.
think that there's going to be a difficulty choosing between following Jesus and being neighborly?
Well, it does remind me of the Neil A. Anderson talk on integrity from conference, where he said as much. Personal integrity means following your church leaders, and that sometimes means not following the second commandment, which is to love one another. So they are sort of redefining it. But what did you guys think about that? You could hear audibly in the room, the people are just sweet. And this was just one of many like this, but this was the most extreme, where she said, it's either the temple or you're stopping us from following Jesus.
I thought there was something in the New Testament about this. Maybe my memory is hazy. I thought somebody asked Jesus once, who is my neighbor? And then he gave this whole parable.
Yeah.
I can't remember it. It wasn't even a famous parable at all. Nobody ever talks about it. What was it?
Well, I love what you said, RFM. You said when you were helping me prep for being on 21st Century Saints about this talk, you said people forget the first commandment, love God, and the second commandment, love your neighbor. You follow the first commandment by what you do as far as the second commandment. That's how you do it. They work together. So this is just, it's very difficult to listen to this because I actually do have a lot of empathy for the LDS members. A few weeks ago, they didn't know that they cared everything about the height of the steeple and they would have to defend this to death. Part of me thinks, is the church putting them in this position to create a persecution complex, to get them more invested in the church and the temple? I don't know. I can't imagine why any organization would put their members in this position, pitting them neighbor against neighbor. And I've seen this in all Cody and Heber, where these cities farther along in the process are completely at odds. They are so fractured. It's really sad. I feel sorry for the members and the residents and everyone. So any other thoughts, or let's go to the next clip. I'm telling you, they're getting better and we're almost done. Not too long.
Just that Mormons can't help but do the Mormon thing, right? Bear their testimony at any chance they get. And you said the one guy closed in the name of Christ.
Yeah,
I've
a
been
kid.
at work meetings in Utah where they decided to have an opening prayer for a work meeting. I mean, Mormons don't know how to do anything else but Mormon, and the
know.
rest of the world looks and goes, "That was weird."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, and that's why I follow temples. And a lot of people have said this really is a Mormon microcosm. You really just see a lot. The curtain is pulled back on everything, the treatment of the members, the tactics, all of it. So let's go to our next one. Let's see. So the height of the steeple. I decided to just go grab the pictures. Let's see. We've got the Paris, France. We've got, I can't read very well, Meridian, Idaho, Mesa, Arizona. Let's go to the next one. These are all
I'm not
domes.
seeing a dome on Mesa, Arizona. Was that just because of the angle?
I think so. Tucson, Hong Kong. I kind of feel like President Nelson right here. Lima, Peru. I'm announcing temples. This is great. I see how you'd be giddy with power. This is good. Singapore and Anchorage, which they just barely designed, and it's still in construction, so they're not putting a tower on that. Cardston, Alberta. And then we've got Leh, Hawaii, and one in Brazil. Now, an interesting one that I found, if you go to the next slide, is the Hong Kong temple. Okay, so Hong Kong was just renovated just about 2017, I think it says. Yeah, 2019, just 5 years ago. And it says, this is from the church's website. The Hong Kong China Temple is the first temple to have the spire and Angel Moroni statue permanently removed as part of the renovation. The spire stood atop the building from the time of its dedication in 96 until the renovation closure in 2019. So that's very confusing to me. They have literally removed the most important element of a temple from this temple. There
no
it
more
is.
pointing heavenward.
And the semblance
man.
of, I know, I don't understand. I do wonder, and my co-host Landon makes this joke about people that were married or performed ordinances in the temples without a spire. Did it take? You know, he kind of compared it to how Pluto used to be a planet when we were all kids, and then suddenly it wasn't. It was a planetoid. So he said maybe these other temples are temploids. They're just not quite, not quite what they're supposed to be, the temploid. All right. So there are examples, is the bottom line, 11 temples that have domes or flat roofs, and they took a spire off, the Hong Kong temple. So let's go to the next slide. Okay. And again, we can go through all these. I just kind of think in the scriptures, whenever you hear high tower or high places, it's a negative connotation, Here you have the Rameumptom. We can speed through these. You have talking about, gold and silver and the Rameumptom. You have the Tower of Babel, right? Where they're trying to go to heaven and it's offensive.
Pointing heavenward.
Yeah, building so high, offensive. And even the great and spacious building, which is the next one where, it stood in the air, high above the earth. It's rare to find a place in the scriptures where being high is something that's positive. And I'm sure a lot of you can come up with even more scriptures than I found, but those are the three just off the top of my head that I thought of. So let's go to the next. Okay. So then the area rep stands up again. And this is interesting. I have to set the scene. So we've seen LDS member after LDS member come to the pulpit, address the board. You heard the board in the last clip saying, okay, is there anybody else that can say anything else that has to do with the actual regulations or zoning and is not your testimony? Okay. So a gentleman gets up and stands at the lectern, LDS. He is about ready to speak. The area rep jumps up and puts an end to it right here.
As the area authority, I'm going to ask that I think you've heard enough comments from members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So if there are any others, I'm going to have you sit down, if that would be okay.
Thank you.
Because I think
he literally told the person to sit back down who was trying to comment in a civic meeting.
All of you here, your friends, I listened to you. I've learned a lot today. My eyes have been opened. I appreciate the man who has served our country. Thank you. Where are you? Thank you. Yes. I know you're right behind the temple. We want to be a good neighbor. We've made concessions at many, many points, and we would continue to probably make more concessions. And we want to be able to be a good neighbor. Regarding the environment, we look at very, very closely to everything regarding the environment. all the animals and all of the nature. We have incredible beauty around the temple as well. We want to be able to be as workable as possible in this. And so I do appreciate all the comments. We appreciate all of the comments which you have made from Fairview United. I am not a resident of Fairview. I have been a Texas resident for 25 years, but and I'm grateful for the opportunity which you've given for us to speak about this. So thank you very much. We love our neighbors and we want to be neighborly. We really do. And we apologize if any of you have taken offense for anything that has been spoken. It comes from the bottom of our heart, and truly, we just want to be someone who is to be able to be loving and kind and compassionate and working together. And that's the end goal for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, it's not.
And he goes on. The end part is they ask him questions and he won't answer questions. That was kind of the point of that one. So again, they're just trying to be, I heard that phrase, bottom of your heart, quite a bit. So anyway, they're trying to, they're just trying to make inroads. They're trying to not appear to be about to say, I'm going to sue you guys if you don't let me do what I'm going to do. So let's go to this next clip. This is the one. Get a box of Kleenex here. You're going to need it for this one. Okay, so this clip, it's an active member and he's very nervous.
Oh,
you can
yes.
tell him, his voice is trembling. I do know behind the scenes that his mom in Utah knew he was going to do this and she flew out to be there with him. So he gets up and stands up with his lovely little wife and they're active members and they're going to talk to the planning board right here.
And my wife were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we like to speak in opposition to the point about the height of the steeple of the temple. And particularly, I'd like to address directly, in a way that hasn't been done tonight, the question of whether there are any doctrinal grounds, any doctrinal basis or tenets in our worship for the height of the steeple, and there are not.
Thank you.
And I don't like the way I felt to hear an area authority of the church tonight dodge that question by my perception. I've worshiped in Latter-day Saint temples for well over a decade, and there are essential rites and ordinances that take place in that building, but the steeple is not related to those.
Thank you.
There it is. Yeah. The cheering goes on and on. I mean, can you even imagine how brave he was to be able to do that? And he says his name. I redacted it, of course, and he said it. So you do have some people that are just saying, I can't say this. I know I'm supposed to say it, but I can't. I can't talk about the steeple. And also now they've kind of added the lighting. The lighting now is the light of Christ. I mean, they're just anything that they need to get the legal workaround they're going to do. So I have one or two more slides left, and then we'll be done here. So what happened at the end? Yes.
Rebecca, what happens to a Mormon who tells the truth publicly?
I feel like, I don't know. I think that's why his mom had to go support him. He might be called in. I have no idea. I don't know what's going to happen. But he felt really strongly about it, and you could tell he was nervous. You could tell his voice was kind of shaking, and he stood up there. So what finally happened after 2.5 hours is the Fairview Planning and Zoning Board voted to recommend denial of the application. Now, this is a recommendation. It will go to the city council next. But as far as the Planning and Zoning Board, which deals with all the nuts and bolts, they said no. And I recently learned from the residents that they will need, because this is so controversial, a super majority in the city council to pass. That means like most of them will have to vote. It can't just be, 5-4. It's going to be a super majority. This meeting is going to take place on June 4th. So we'll definitely watch for that. But everybody, cheering. It did not pass. It was stopped right there. So I think I have 2 more slides left. So this is very interesting. I will tell you, in all of these cities, the divisiveness and the unneighborliness starts early. It's starting now. So this actually is a letter that one of the people in the neighborhood in Lone Mountain received. But these kinds of letters are being received everywhere by the neighbors who are simply saying, follow the laws, follow the master plan. Don't be disrespectful. Please build what will fit into our city. So this person writes to one of our residents in Lone Mountain. Your message is so negative and full of hate. I seriously can't fathom why you wouldn't want a beautiful building in this area. I am LDS, and I want to rip down your hate posters on Craig Road. I'm going to show you the posters in a minute, so badly. I have been in this area my whole life, and our religion is very peaceful, and we don't like anyone to feel
except for
attacked.
ripping down the posters.
That was a little bit of a passive aggressiveness, yeah. And we don't want anyone to feel attacked or hurt. You are allowed in the building during the open house before it's dedicated. As for the height of the building, you can't compare the height limit of a religious temple to a freaking house, sweetie. Exactly. You are allowed in the lobby at all times, but like any other members only building, after the dedication, you are only allowed in the lobby. So womp womp.
Womp womp.
Womp womp. I have no response, and this was said to just the nicest lady. She's like, oh, I'm not sure what to do with this, So go to the next slide.
With peaceful members of the church like this, who needs hateful members,
She's taking a page out of Brigham Young's book, tearing down the sign on top of the cairn at Mountain Meadows.
Exactly. Vengeance is mine, and I have taken some. Yeah. So the signs that she was talking about were simply things about, please attend the city council meeting. And if you go to the next sign, it simply has information about drainage and height and traffic and roof lines. And, it does say no, but it explains why you should say no. It goes into the details of the planning and the zoning. So these are the signs that they want to rip down. So my next slide, and I've only got 2 left, I just couldn't get past that phrase. I had to make a giant one-eyed temple monster pounding down, womp womp, on all the citizens of Heber and Cody and Lone Mountain and Bakersfield and McKinney. So there it is. Everybody knows I just kind of go crazy with AI.
It's like the Whomping Willow.
The Whomping Willow, exactly. So, and one eye because it's an all-seeing eye. So I have one last slide. Now this is where it starts to get scary. It's one thing to receive a letter. Great. This, what I'm about to share with you, has happened in Heber. It has happened in Cody. It is now starting to happen in Lone Mountain. So this is someone that's going after someone professionally and going after their business. So this woman said, adding to the personal attacks from proponents of the temple, that means LDS people, I received my first ever 1-star review. This woman has a business. I have never had an inquiry from this LDS person. I've never worked with them. And I have done many LDS wedding events. So this is an event planner who works in Lone Mountain. This again is from Lone Mountain, but I'm telling you, this happens everywhere. So on Yelp or wherever this is, 1 star is given to her, and it says discriminates against other people because of their religious beliefs. She is not inclusive. So it gets scary here when they start to boycott businesses, when they start to attack people in their business and their livelihood. This is not a game. I think that's what I'm trying to say. So any final thoughts?
What the hell is a Mormon doing accusing somebody else of not being inclusive?
Yeah,
that is
Mormonism has been not inclusive of every single subgroup in America.
That is just as disingenuous as what Ted Baxter was saying to the city council.
Yeah. You just can't make this stuff up. And I will tell you that in Lone Mountain, where these two, the letter and this came from, tomorrow night is their planning commission meeting. And the LDS Church has sent out letters, made videos telling everybody to wear dark blue shirts and to show up at the city square. They've given them parking information. They have told them that they're going to be videotaping it so that they can show the overwhelming support for the temple. And I just learned that they have gotten an event permit and they are going to be busing people in to the city square. I understand that this is going to be streamed, audio and visual. This is the Lone Mountain Planning Commission meeting. If anybody doesn't have anything better to do tomorrow night, you might want to take a look, because probably the sound bites that we heard just now are nothing compared to what's heating up in Lone Mountain.
If you do go there, be sure not to wear navy blue.
Yeah, don't wear navy blue. Anyway, that's the end of my segment. Whew, it's a lot. Temple watching takes its toll.
That was amazing.
Yeah. All right. Well, womp womp. Let's
Womp
move on
womp. That's the
to
new
John
phrase.
Glenn
Womp the
and
temple.
our
Womp
final
it.
story of the night.
Nice job, Rebecca. That was fantastic. All right. Well, I'll try and be quick. For those of you who just saw the live stream I did on Mormon Stories, this will be repetitive, but I wanted to make sure that the Mormon Newscast audience got to hear kind of some breaking news. I'm starting with some photos. You may remember on the Mormon Newscast a while back, we talked about Charlie Bird, former BYU Cosmo the Cougar mascot, and his husband, Ryan Clifford. We kind of discussed openly the fact and celebrated the fact that not only are Charlie and Ryan married, same-sex married as believing faithful Mormons, but that they were attending their ward and had callings. And this is a photo we got from USA Today. I chose that photo not for any other reason. Well, it's fun. It's basically Charlie Bird dressed up as, is it Travis Kelce? Is that right? Taylor Swift's boyfriend, who's Kansas City Chiefs wide tight end. Is that right?
He's the best tight end in the NFL, and he's her boyfriend. Yes.
Yeah. And then Ryan Clifford's dressed up as Taylor Swift.
Yep.
And this is published in USA Today, so I don't think they're in any way embarrassed about these photos. But so if you can, think back to Charlie and Ryan. And what we wanted to talk about was something kind of interesting. And I've got my slides up if you want me to advance them, Bill, or you can advance them, either one. I've got them staged.
Oh, either way. I'll tell you what, let's add those.
Ready to go. Okay, cool. So you'll also remember on Mormon Stories, we did an episode about this with Gerardo, talking about it. And then recently the Salt Lake Tribune article just this past weekend talked about David Archuleta's new song, Held Together, and they interviewed his mom, Lupe Bartholomew, who basically resigned her membership from the church once she found out her son, David Archuleta, was gay. And basically said, I don't want to go to sad heaven. Mormon Church believes that, only active, faithful, believing, temple-worthy Mormons get to live together in the celestial kingdom. And Lupe basically said, I'd rather go to hell with you than to Mormon heaven without you. And that's just a little bit of context for some news, kind of some breaking news that I received. And I'm kind of sad about this over the weekend, but a very close friend of mine who does not want to be named right now has reported to me that just over the past month, and by the way, the reason why I mentioned this previous episode on Mormon Stories is because we were celebrating the fact that, to our understanding, our best understanding, the Mormon Church had put an unofficial kibosh on excommunication of same-sex married couples. So we had heard through our own sources and just anecdotally that the church seemed to kind of stop excommunicating same-sex married couples, and Charlie and Ryan were kind of the poster children for same-sex married Mormon couples who had callings and were active and were not being excommunicated. Well, I'm sad to announce that we've received word from a very reliable source who's very plugged in at, in some ways, very high levels in the church, that just over the past month, there have been 5 excommunications of 5 faithful lesbian couples within the Mormon Church who were same-sex married. 3 of them reportedly, ironically, are in Texas. 1 of them is in Utah, and 1 of them is in Tennessee. And we're super sad to hear that, because we were not talking about Charlie and Ryan with the hopes that the church would then, start a backlash and start excommunicating couples. And of course, we suspect that these bishops or stake presidents who have been excommunicating these couples have never heard the words Charlie Bird or Ryan Clifford, don't watch Mormon Stories or the Mormon Newscast, and they're probably just operating based on their understanding of church doctrine and church policy. But regardless of what anyone knows or what anyone said or what anyone's heard, the church has not officially called off excommunication of same-sex married couples. And just over the past month, we know of 5. So this brings up a lot of questions that I just wanted to throw open to this group. You know, why the uptick? Why have there been 5 excommunications just in the past month? You know, why are they lesbian couples? You know, why are we not hearing about gay couples? That just feels really off. You know, is it unethical for more, even though we're glad Charlie Bird and Ryan Clifford are being left alone, is it unethical for the Mormon Church to protect some same-sex married couples if they happen to be from wealthy, affluential families, or they happen to have very large social media followings? Is it
Or
unethical?
if they serve in the general primary presidency, for instance.
Absolutely. Who are you referring to there?
That's as far as I'm going.
That's fine.
Lynn.
Yeah. So like, I know, I got you now. Yeah. So like, is it unethical to protect certain LGBTQ same-sex married couples, but then to be allowing others to be excommunicated? Is this uneven enforcement problematic? And then, you know, something that, Rebecca, I know is a topic near and dear to your heart. Where in the heck is the new head of communications for the Mormon Church? Where's Aaron Sherinian? Has he resigned? Has he been put in a closet somewhere? Is he being held captive?
Free Aaron.
Yeah, free Aaron. Where is he? Why isn't he talking about this? Why isn't he making it clear what is or isn't the policy? Is it possible that he's resigned or he's been, you know, demoted because of the backlash? You know, because we know that he has been a vocal ally for the LGBTQ community prior to joining the Mormon Church. But once that got out, the DesNat community within Mormonism lost its mind. And now we haven't heard from him in 4 or 5 months. So again, we're not wanting the Mormon Church to start excommunicating these same-sex married couples. We celebrate Ryan and Charlie and, you know, all the same-sex married couples who are enjoying their membership in the church. We don't believe that people should be excommunicated. And Bill, you could just throw up you could take the slides down now. We don't think the church, you know, we don't think same-sex married Mormons should have to choose between their faith, their religious communities, and their families and their love. So, you know, we don't want the church to excommunicate all same-sex married Mormon couples. We want the church to just stop the barbaric practice of excommunicating people, you know, who are just trying to love the people they want to love. So I just wanted to take turns, everyone. I've kind of shared some thoughts and some questions. I'd like to hear what each of you have to say. Bill, why don't we start with you, and then we can do Rebecca and then RFM.
Yeah. I came to think that LDS Church wasn't true, but I had no problem continuing to go and to give it my time and energy and resources, right? But there came a point in 2015 where I decided that maybe it couldn't even be good. And when it goes after people and contradicts itself by leaving other people alone, number one, that's inconsistent. Nobody can plan their life around any sort of inconsistency, at least if the rules are consistent, even if they're not healthy. At least people then can choose whether they engage those rules or not. When some people are allowed to participate and others are not under the same sort of standard, then everyone is sort of wondering what's going to happen next. And nobody should have to live that way within a religion. So number one. Number two is that in excommunicating people who don't quite fit in, it might be important to note that you have, as a church, been really unhealthy to people who didn't fit in the past, only to tell them decades later that, oh, wait a minute, it was actually us that were wrong. You should have fit in all along. And when you cause harm, and I'll just use the priesthood ban from 1978 and prior, at least that kid or that parent or that sibling could go home to their Black family and go like, man, our church does that to us. But when you do this to gay and lesbian and transgender folks, they might be able to go home to their family, but their family is different than them in this way generally. And you're putting somebody in a position where they might even be more lonely or isolated than people of color prior to 78. And my suggestion is, when you cause real harm to people by marginalizing others, especially when the data indicates they might not have a strong support system in place, I think that you ought to err every time on the side of caution before you cause that kind of harm to people.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
Rebecca?
Well, it's been 133 days since Aaron took his position. It is my pet project. I don't know why. It's just so interesting to me. And I did confirm that he still has that title and role. He has an admin and an office. And I also heard from another source that he himself doesn't like all this fuss. He's embarrassed that he's become the story. And so he voluntarily is laying low. However, I did discuss that with RFM, and we're like, what kind of job lets you just not do your job? Because he is supposed to be the spokesman. So, and he's a flashpoint. As soon as he starts speaking, that shows acceptance as someone who's an ally being in the upper echelons of the Mormon church. So for now, he's silent. On the other topic, I will say I was inspired by your episode, John, on Charlie Bird, to go and see on my podcast, Mormonish, if we could find some couples. So we did an episode called Same-Sex Mormon and Married. And we found 5 couples. One of them would not appear. A couple of them appeared with avatars, and some just appeared as themselves. The one that wouldn't appear were much like Charlie Bird. They were married. They were same-sex. They were taking the sacrament. They had callings. They lived in an affluent area. It was one of those kinds of situations. Very interesting. And they didn't seem to have a concern that anything like that would happen to them. The other couple that we interviewed had just gotten married. They'd been very accepted in their ward. They'd been attending together. They'd felt love and support, and they had just gotten married and moved. And they recognized the roulette scenario. And so they were looking for a new ward. They were going to shop around and see if they could find one where they might be accepted. And again, that only lasts as long as that's the bishop and the counselors. Then it's going to change and something else happened. A couple of the other couples that we interviewed, that's exactly what did happen. They were accepted on one level. As soon as the bishop changed, they were called in. They were a problem. However, 3 of the 4 couples that we did interview were participating in some way and did have acceptance. They didn't have formal callings, but people in the ward had kind of carved out a little area for them. They couldn't be ministering sisters. They were called ministering angels, and they could go visit some of the more, destitute people in the ward. It was really interesting to see these creative workarounds, which tells me that people in wards love people and want to do the right thing. They're being blocked by the system, what's systematically inherent there. The saddest couple, I think, that we interviewed, they were not allowed to participate anymore. In fact, as soon as they got married, they were brought in and said, you either resign or you will face a court of love. They decided to resign because they didn't even want to put their friend, the bishop, through that. If you can imagine how Christ-like that is. They said, we'll just resign. And they left, and they thought, will I be able to participate in any way? And they were basically told, not really, maybe here or there, you can't comment, you can't do this, you can't. Again, such roulette compared to some of these other couples who were actively participating. And the most disturbing thing about this last couple I'm describing is that after a couple months, the bishop talked to them again and said, we've gotten word from Salt Lake. This is what they said. And the resigning isn't going to cut it. We do need to have a court. So that kind of throws a wrench in my theory that it is local leadership, although I feel it mostly is. And I feel it's cowardice from upper leadership to leave it to the local leaders. Reminds me of the Mountain Meadows Massacre, which I always bring up. But again, their hands are clean. The local leadership is doing it. Sometimes they stay, sometimes they're kicked out. And as you said, John, who can live that way? No one can live that way. You can't plan a future, especially when there are children involved. You can't. So it was interesting to do that episode. But the one positive thing I will say is that they all described outpouring of love from people in the ward. The people love them. The people accept them. It's leadership that is having to work it out.
If you resign,
yeah.
If I resign, I should no longer be your problem. You
They were
shouldn't be able to
so
still
confused.
pester me. I'm
They
no
were so
longer on the
confused.
rolls.
Yeah. He was officially resigned. His resignation had been accepted, and they were told you need to come back in. And he had left it kind of there going, I don't know what to do now. We're like, we don't know what to do either. It was pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay,
Pam.
so
Thanks,
here's
Rebecca.
what I think. What I think is this, is that you know the exact number of days, Rebecca, that Aaron Sherinian has been
I have
silent.
too
And
much
John,
time
I
on
don't
my-
think it's a question of how long it's been since we last heard from him. I don't think we ever heard from him. There was an announcement made that he took office as the head of communications for the LDS Church at the beginning of the year, and then nothing. Of course, it was after everybody said, why is this guy being picked as the head of communications for the LDS Church when he has an established track record, long and illustrious, of being an ally? I'm sorry, Rebecca, is he gay too?
No.
Okay, so he's an
married,
ally.
but he has a lot of, ally and affirming posts on his,
Yes.
he did on his social media and pictures. Those were
Pictures,
scrubbed
yeah.
as
Right.
everyone started to pick up on that. Yeah, those were taken down.
Okay, so here's my question then. Assuming that this is all authentic, and I have no reason to doubt that his allyship is authentic and he continues to maintain it, it's not something he just turned off when he took the job with the church. His lack of appearance up to this point, I think, has been a novelty, and you've kept good track of it, Rebecca. But what do you do, Aaron, if you're the head of communications for the LDS Church? And now, if you didn't know it before, now you're knowing that in the past month, 5 lesbian couples have been excommunicated from the church of which you are the head of communications for no reason other than the fact that they are lesbians in a committed relationship. There's no other reason. How does that square with your being an ally to the community? And are you going to do anything about it? And if so, when? That's my question for Aaron. I've got to think he's been thinking these thoughts himself. Maybe he'll just say, okay, I'm done. I'm going to go off and do something else. I had a whole career before this. I'll have a whole career after this. But I've got to think that a person who I would expect to be sensitive to these issues has got to be having some cognitive dissonance about this position he's taken of the church that is continuing to do these types of excommunications.
Thanks, RFM. I'll just add my 2 cents. You all gave wonderful insight, so thank you. I don't understand humans sometimes, but also Mormons sometimes. Like, obviously, the Mormon church today probably couldn't get away with banning black men from the priesthood or banning black people from the temples. And, thank goodness that in 1978, they finally fixed that. It was late, but thank goodness they fixed it, because that would be unacceptable in 2024. What I just don't get is that somehow it's still acceptable for women to not be full stakeholders within Mormonism, and I'm specifically speaking to leadership in the priesthood. I don't understand how every Mormon isn't outraged by that, and is just asleep at the wheel, okay with it, lulled into this passive security or acceptance. But it's the same with this. How is, there are plenty of LGBT allies within the Mormon church now. My understanding is it's possible that maybe as many Mormons support same-sex marriage as oppose it, maybe even more than half. But now that we know, now that thousands of people know and will know that the church is, opening hunting season on, bizarrely, same-sex married lesbians, but presumably same-sex married Mormons church-wide in a selective way. How does this not inspire outrage? Not just in Utah, but throughout at least the U.S. church, if not the world. I just can't believe that in 2024, it's okay for the Mormon church to be excommunicating legally married same-sex couples that just want to love each other and worship in the church. The fact that a same-sex married couple would want to worship in a church that that excludes them and denounces them as inferior is a miracle. And then the church wants to turn around and squander that miracle by selectively excommunicating them. I don't understand Mormons. I don't understand progressive Mormons allowing this. And I don't understand, people sometimes, especially in 2024. So that's my little rant.
Okay. Anything else from you guys in regards to tonight? Otherwise, I'd love to turn some time over to each of you just to share whatever it is that you're doing kind of in your personal projects with your own either podcast or anything else you're working on.
Oh, wait a second. Rebecca, is that your doggy?
Yes, dang it. They just
What's
won't
your doggy's
stop.
name?
They're my grand dogs, Alice and Rosie.
You have two of them?
Yes, and then I have a cat named Todd.
Why is the one growling?
They just growl. I don't know. They have dementia. I'm not sure what's wrong with them. Okay, I'll go first and then I'll mute while they're not barking. So I think it's really funny how we all still say turn the time over. Like there's no other phrase that we can use. We cannot stop using that. I'd like to turn the time over to you guys. Yeah, you don't even, Bill just said it. You don't even realize.
Once a bishop, always a bishop.
That's what I mean. You can't not
I'm
say it.
locked in.
Okay, I have an episode coming up tomorrow night that I am really excited about, and it's extremely important and useful. It is about tithing. This is another soapbox issue of mine, as I've discussed with other people. I had a faithful member contact me. He has been a ward clerk multiple times. He's a financial planner. He is an accountant. He's been an executive secretary. He has seen the ravages that tithing, the way it is now paid, takes on families and the deep hole that they end up in, where he shows us some data that there's no way out. There really isn't. He has, as a faithful member and somebody who's been in bishoprics before, ways to look at paying tithing that doctrinally is sound. He uses only LDS sources to discuss this, ways that it's a win-win for the church. People would be able to pay tithing. So you can issue them a temple recommend. It's a win-win. And a family is not going to be in this bottomless pit where, although they keep paying their tithing, they can't understand why it never works. This is probably one of the most fascinating episodes I've ever done before. It's on Mormonish Podcast tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And it's not just, we're a post-Mormon podcast, but all of us have family members that continue to pay tithing. Some are in mixed faith marriages where tithing is a huge issue. So this gentleman who we have on, his goal is to try to give some people a place where you can start talking using faithful sources. And even perhaps a bishop or somebody would see this and be able to counsel someone and say, look, if you look at tithing this way, it can work for everyone. So I'm really excited about this episode tomorrow at 6. Now I'll mute so my dogs don't disturb.
RFM, how about you?
I just wonder how much Rebecca has to abuse her dogs to make them react that way to her.
I'm telling
Don't
you,
maybe call the SPCA on you.
They're not my dogs. They're my grand dogs. There's a difference.
Oh, so then it's okay to abuse them.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay. So anyway, I got tons of stuff going, but the one thing I would like to tell everybody is I am very, very enthusiastic about that panel discussion. It's the last Radio Free Mormon that went up. It's on YouTube. Rebecca was on it. Renee Steelman was on it. Martine Smith was on it. And Lila Tuller was on it. And we had a 3-hour discussion that was just absolutely amazing. And I was so thrilled with it. When you have a panel, sometimes it goes okay. Sometimes it goes bad. Sometimes it goes fantastic. This was above fantastic. So if you haven't watched that, I would encourage you to go watch it, because all the 4 panelists on the show were just wonderful. They were all doing great and bouncing off of each other. It was exciting. It was energetic. It was illuminating. So that's what I have to say about that. Please watch it if you haven't already.
Mr. DeLynn.
Yeah, well, following on the theme of panels, some of you will know, if you follow Mormon Stories, that a little while ago we did a panel of ex-bishops, and it was extremely well received. Just having bishops talk about what it's like to be a bishop, what they loved, what they didn't love, what they would change. And we're happy to announce that this week we're going to be recording our next panel, which is a panel of ex-Relief Society presidents. A lot of people requested that. We're bringing in some ex-Relief Society presidents from all around the country, and there'll be 4 of them. And Bishop Bo, I noticed that Bishop Bo Euler is here in the chats. Shout out to Bishop Bo Euler, who's helped us organize this panel. We've got a lot of other panels to come, but check out in the next week or two this amazing panel of ex-Mormon Relief Society presidents. It's sure to be a good one.
So you had to have a bishop organize a panel of ex-Relief Society presidents. Is that what I'm hearing?
Uh-oh.
The picture, you could take the boy out of Mormonism, but you can't take the Mormonism out of the boy.
Awesome. And then just to let folks know, we dropped episode number 2 this morning in what will end up being about 14 hours of conversation between Clark Abood, who is in support of the idea that Joseph Smith did not originate polygamy. Instead, it was part of an apostolic coup d'etat by Brigham Young and his associates to usurp authority from the church and create polygamy on their own, but blame it on Joseph. And Dan Vogel, who acts as the conversation, representing the conversation on the other side of the aisle, and shows Clark and Dan both show us all the documents that polygamy deniers use. And Dan Vogel runs us through each document, helping us understand the historical context from a historian's perspective. And I think part 2 has been quite illuminating. Part 3 will release next week, but part 2 is up on the channel. So we're about 9 hours in or so at this point. And what I think is a very vibrant conversation in terms of 2 really different perspectives, claiming these documents are used in ways that contradict each other. And I think it's fun to see and hear them hash it out. So
I haven't listened to everything, but I have listened to large segments of both of those, Bill. First off, incredible idea, great idea for you to do this. I am impressed not only with the level of scholarship, but on both sides with Clark Abood as well as with Dan Vogel, the moderating tone, because this issue sometimes gets people very emotional, and they act sometimes less than rational and cool-headed. That's all I'm saying, because it's an emotional issue for some people. But Clark Abood has been doing fantastic, as far as I've seen, at just, setting forth the facts as he sees them and his understanding of how to interpret those. And I think that Dan Vogel's been doing the same thing. And I think this is managing to shed a lot more light and less heat than some of these conversations can.
Yeah, I think this is a much more effective way for people to gain information and make an informed decision about which way they'll fall and come to believe. So, folks, this is the Mormon Newscast. Grateful to Rebecca Biblioteca, John DeLynn, and Radio Free Mormon. I'm Bill Reel. We'll see you next week, Monday at 6 p.m. with whatever's happening in Mormonism over the next 7 days. This will end the stream now. Womp womp.